You open your paycheck stub, the digital version, the little PDF that lands in your inbox every 2 weeks with the same quiet indifference of a weather report. You don't really look at the big number anymore. You look at the smaller one underneath it, the number that actually lands in your account after everything else takes its cut first. Your salary is supposed to define your lifestyle, the car you drive, the apartment you live in, the way waiters look at you when you order. But almost nobody talks about how differently the exact same dollar feels, depending on which number sits above it on that stub. So let's walk through every level, one paycheck, one quiet shift at a time. You're making $25,000 a year, and the apartment you live in has a window that doesn't fully close, so winter air slips through a gap you've tried to seal 3 different times with 3 different kinds of tape. Rent eats more than a third of every paycheck before you've spent a single dollar on anything else. And the math you do at the grocery store isn't about preference, it's about survival. Putting items back on the shelf based on cents, not dollars. A friend invites you to a birthday dinner somewhere a little nicer than usual, and you spend the entire meal calculating tip percentages instead of actually listening to the conversation around you. You order the cheapest entree and quietly skip dessert, telling yourself you're just not that hungry, while catching a brief, almost unreadable glance from the waiter when you decline the wine list entirely. At work, your manager mentions overtime is available this weekend, and you say yes immediately before he's even finished the sentence. The kind of yes that comes from need, not ambition. Here's the truth nobody says directly at this level. It's not that you're bad with money, it's that there's no room in the math for a single mistake. So every decision carries weight that has nothing to do with the actual dollar amount involved. You go home that night, recheck the lock on a door that's always locked, and fall asleep doing arithmetic instead of dreaming. You're making $40,000 a year now, and the first thing that changes isn't anything dramatic. It's that the card no longer hesitates for that extra half second at checkout, the pause you used to brace for without even realizing you were bracing. You move into an apartment with windows that actually close, and the first night you sleep there, you notice the silence. Not from the street outside, but from the absence of cold air finding its way in. A coworker invites you to split a bill 4 ways at lunch, and for the first time you agree without doing the math first, a small moment that feels strangely enormous. Your landlord, who used to take 3 days to respond to maintenance requests, replies within the hour now. A shift you don't fully understand until you remember he probably ran a background check that looked slightly more stable this time. At a family dinner, someone comments that you seem to be doing all right these days, delivered casually, but landing somewhere deeper. The first time in years anyone has framed your finances as a positive instead of a concern. The deeper truth surfacing here is one that quietly contradicts everything you assumed. Money doesn't remove problems at this level. It just changes how loud they're allowed to be inside your own head. The same emergencies arriving, but landing softer. You cross $60,000 a year and you finally book a vacation, an actual one. Not a weekend at a relative's house disguised as a getaway, but a real flight somewhere you chose simply because you wanted to go. The hold music when you call the airline about a delayed flight only loops once before a human voice picks up, a small detail you wouldn't have noticed years earlier, but somehow notice now. A loan officer reviewing your application for a car loan leans forward slightly when she sees your income, her tone shifting from procedural to almost collaborative. Let's see what we can get you approved for. A phrase that lands strangely warm in your chest. At a family gathering, you mention the new car, and the reactions arrive faster than usual, more enthusiastic. An aunt who rarely comments suddenly has opinions about which color suits you best. Your manager pulls you into an unplanned meeting and mentions almost casually that leadership has been watching your trajectory. A phrase nobody used about you before this raise now appearing twice in a single sentence. The uncomfortable truth surfacing here is one you can't quite ignore anymore. Visibility isn't only about effort, it's about crossing thresholds other people decided mattered long before you ever walked into the room, and you've just crossed one without fully realizing it happened. You're at $85,000 a year now, and you buy your first home. Nothing extravagant, just a place with your own name on the deed for the first time in your life. At closing, the agent who once seemed rushed and distracted lingers a little longer this time, shaking your hand twice, asking if you're considering other properties for the future. A question you don't have an answer for, but one that feels oddly significant just for being asked. A neighbor you've never spoken to waves from across the street the very first week, then invites you to a barbecue by the third, and you wonder, half joking to yourself, whether the invitation was meant for you or for the address itself. At work, your name starts appearing on email threads you weren't included on before. Conversations about budget and planning that used to happen entirely without you. Nobody explaining the shift, you're simply suddenly in the room. A relative calls, not to check in, but to ask carefully, almost rehearsed, if you'd be willing to help out with something until things even out on their end, and you say yes before fully processing the quiet irritation sitting just beneath your generosity. The realization settling in here is an uncomfortable one. The moment people sense stability in you, some of them start treating your money as a shared resource, even when it was never offered as one. You hit $120,000 a year, and the first sign isn't a number, it's a parking spot closer to the entrance that nobody officially assigned, but everyone now avoids parking in. In a meeting, you make a comment you would have made 2 years earlier, word for word, and this time people actually write it down. The room not laughing louder, just listening differently, leaning in a half second sooner than before. At a restaurant with colleagues, the host glances at the name on the reservation, looks up and says, "Right this way." In a tone reserved, you realize, for names the system has somehow flagged as worth a better table. An old friend from years ago reaches out of nowhere, warm and nostalgic at first, the conversation eventually drifting toward a business opportunity they'd love your thoughts on, and you recognize the pattern before the message even finishes loading. The realization that stings a little, the first time it fully lands, is one most people discover too late. Once people sense you've crossed a certain threshold, your attention itself becomes a kind of currency they want to spend, and you stop being someone people simply enjoy talking to, becoming instead someone people quietly calculate the value of talking to. You're earning $200,000 a year now, sitting in a boardroom with your name freshly printed on a small plate by the door, something that took years to earn and a single afternoon to install. People stand a little straighter when you walk past. Not from fear exactly, but from some quiet calculation about what your mood today might mean for the rest of their week. A vendor you've never personally met sends a gift basket to your office, unprompted, with a card reading, "Looking forward to working together," before you've agreed to work together at all. At home, an old classmate posts something online tagging you, mentioning your title, your company, in a tone that reads less like pride in you and more like proof of proximity to you. A reporter from a small industry newsletter requests a quote for a story, and you read the email 3 times before responding, choosing each word like it might outlive the conversation it came from. The lonely truth surfacing here is quiet but real. The more visible your income becomes, the less anyone actually corrects you, disagrees with you, or offers the version of honesty that used to arrive free, back when you had nothing anyone particularly wanted from you. You cross $350,000 a year, and the math becomes hard to ignore. A single strong bonus now exceeds what most people in your life earn in an entire year of work, a fact you recalculate twice, certain you've misplaced a decimal point somewhere. You don't feel dramatically different, which is exactly the strange part nobody prepares you for, the same Tuesday morning routine, just with numbers attached to it that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. A financial advisor you never contacted reaches out, offering a complimentary wealth strategy session, a phrase that confirms what you've started to suspect, that your income has crossed into a category automatically noticed by people whose entire job is noticing. At a family gathering, a relative who once dismissed your career choices outright now asks seriously what you think about a major decision they're facing, the dynamic between you shifting in a way neither of you names directly. You answer carefully, aware that something has changed, not in how smart you've become, but in how seriously your opinion is suddenly weighed. The uncomfortable truth settling in here is one rarely said aloud. Respect in financial conversations rarely arrives through explanation. It arrives quietly, the moment people sense you've already solved a problem they're still struggling with. You're at $500,000 a year now, and you find yourself avoiding certain topics entirely at dinner with old friends, not from secrecy, but from a new awareness that even casual comments about money now land differently than you intend them to. A distant acquaintance, somehow aware of your income, starts liking every single thing you post online within minutes, a small, almost comedic confirmation of a pattern you'd long suspected but never directly confirmed. At work, a high-stakes project fails, the kind of failure that would have kept you awake for nights rehearsing apologies a few years earlier, and instead you move through the consequences with a calm that visibly confuses your colleagues, who don't realize the failure no longer threatens your entire foundation, only your pride. A relative calls, not to ask for money outright, but to talk through a difficult financial stretch, treating you, almost without realizing it, as a kind of emotional safety net simply because of what your income now represents in their mind. You reassure them with more confidence than you fully feel inside, performing a calm you're still, in some private way, learning to actually believe yourself. The truth crystallizing here is the most uncomfortable one yet. Once people sense you've crossed into serious income, their attention toward you increases sharply, while their honesty with you, almost without exception, quietly decreases at the exact same rate. You're walking past the same building you used to live in years ago, back when your salary was $25,000 and the windows never fully closed against winter. A young woman is standing outside it now on the phone, voice tight, clearly negotiating with the landlord about a late payment. The exact tone you remember using yourself, careful, apologetic, slightly desperate to sound more stable than you actually felt. You don't say anything grand. You simply slow your pace, catch her eye for a second and say, "The second floor window on the left never closes all the way, just so you know." A small, useless piece of information that somehow means more than it should, coming from someone who clearly once lived there too. She looks at you confused, unsure what to make of the comment or the person delivering it. And in that brief, almost accidental exchange, the entire arc of everything you've experienced finally reveals its shape. Every salary level you crossed never actually changed who you were on the inside. Not really. It only changed the volume of every problem you already had, turning emergencies into inconveniences, one quiet threshold at a time. The version of you who once skipped dessert at a birthday dinner is still in there somewhere. Not erased, just no longer doing the math out loud. And maybe that's the real measurement nobody puts on a paycheck stub. Not how much you earn, but how clearly you still remember the exact moment when every single dollar mattered enough to put something back on the shelf.